good. Good to be expected. I'm Ben Peterson, the Planning Commission's Director.
Good afternoon. I'm Delane Simpson, Chairman of the Code Enforcement and Nuisance Board. I want to call to order on October 23rd about 5:10 at City Hall Commission Chambers. That meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Deere.
Yes.
Simpson.
Here.
Dearbone. Wilder.
Here.
Thomas.
Present.
Okay. I'd like to swear in our staff, please. You swear to tell the truth, nothing but truth, so help you God. Thank you. Now we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
No minutes. They'll be here next month.
Okay. Tonight, we're doing something different, planning and zoning enforcement issue. And for those present, be advised that we don't make the rules. We listen to side of everything that's presented and try to comply and make sure things are fair and equal in every respect. Our first hearing agenda is, again, like I say, planning and zoning enforcement, citation BG 2018-03-PC 615 Cabell Drive. The owners are Grant and Sonna Wilson, and the respondents Grant Wilson and Officer James Heady. So we have reviewed a lengthy presentation. I don't know if anybody else has got this or not, but is someone here going to present this? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then please do so.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is James Eric Heady. I am the Zoning and Compliance Officer for the City County Planning Commission. This case reference to 615 Cabell Drive. And to start off, it started out in May 31st, 2018. There was a potential rezoning meeting with Mr. Wilson and the planning staff. And that's where the planning staff discovered alterations that Mr. Wilson did on the property, which were in violation, and he's advised of the violations. July 26th of 2018, received a complaint of removal of trees along the property line. Myself and Eric Dren went out to the property and documented with photos and reviewed the area and did find that there was no landscape buffer along the property line, but also there was a unscreened dumpster and added gravel to the drive, the parking area. On July 26th, also, I sent a courtesy email to Mr. Wilson, reference to inquiring about a timeline for the landscape plan. And on the 27th of July, I ended up talking to Mr. Wilson, and I sent him, the first time I sent him, the landscape requirement for the zoning, reference to the landscape buffer. Also requested on that date that he send in a landscape plan, and that was on the 27th of July. Didn't hear anything back from him, but on August the 6th, there was another complaint that came into the planning office, reference to a legal sign. It was, I went out and looked, and it was a post sign, which in that area, it's supposed to be a monument type style sign. So then again, there was another violation. So August the 9th, I ended up issuing a notice of violation, reference to the sign, landscape plan, paving, and the dumpster screening. And it had been about 2 weeks since the July 27th when I requested the landscape plan. I met with Mr. Wilson August the 10th, and we went over some of the violations, and I resent to his email for the second time the landscape buffer requirements reference to the zone ordinances. That NOV, notice of violation, had a 30-day resolution period. So on September the 10th, I re-inspected the property after the 30-day period and observed absolutely nothing changed, no correction of any of the zoning compliance issues. On September the 12th, I ended up issuing a citation reference to the four violations: the screening of the dumpster, the post sign, the paving, and the landscape permit plan. And I spoke with Mr. Wilson, and I forwarded for the third time the requirement for the landscape buffer reference to the zoning ordinance. Let's see, that was September the 12th. September the 14th, emailed and offered an opportunity to meet with Mr. Wilson and his attorney within the next 2 weeks. And September the 27th, I got an email from Mr. Wilson that he's going to be out of town till October the 8th. October the 8th, I had a citation where I revised, took off the sign violation because he did take down the face of the sign, but it still, I did not have the landscape plan, buffer plan, the paving, and the dumpster screening. And so October the 23rd, here we are, and it's 3 days from 3 months that we've been trying to have compliance reference to the landscape plan and the other issues. I've got a few photos. Show you what it looked like before. Yeah. Commissioners, what's on the board there is from a street view that's actually June 2015, and it shows the tree line through there that's actually the landscape buffer between the single-family residence and the multiple use zone. This is another photo that just shows the tree line. Pay attention to the second telephone pole through there. You'll see as it changes. This is another look from Cabell, but it's showing the landscape. And this is the July 2018 from Chestnut that shows there's no buffer in between those properties and those residents. Now this is the photos for the way it looks right now. And that telephone pole by the dumpster, there was trees lined up back through that area. Yeah, thank you, the pointer. Yeah. And there's another look. That's the added gravel through here in the parking area. And from the photo of street view, this was all vegetation back through here and trees at one point. There's another view from the corner of the property. And it shows the added gravel and the lack of landscape buffering. And this is another view that shows the parking area and the view to the houses now, where there's nothing that that blocks, headlights or any of the things associated with vehicle use area. Might have to get you to get me back. Oh yeah, that might be the last one. That's the last one.
Which property actually is 615 Cabell?
Is what is the property?
Is there a house or a building on it?
It is apartment building.
Show me again what that apartment
Yes,
building.
sir. All right, this is a side view of 621. All right, and this other, one of them 621, one of them 615.
How many units are altogether in this project? How many units, different buildings?
There's two buildings.
Just two buildings.
Two
Just
properties,
these two?
actually, 621 and 615, I believe.
Okay.
And they're owned by by Mr. Wilson? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think these are apartments for reference that Frank Newman built years ago. The house that's the Lambakai house, and the property behind it was Dr. Newman, his father's property. From a history point of view, that kind of puts it in better perspective.
Right. Okay, thank you. Are you finished? You can
Well-
continue.
No, yeah, do you want any recommendations, or is there?
Just summarize the citation and the violations. So there's 3 different things referenced on that citation. The parking standard in the zoning ordinance says that any parking area must be paved within the city of Bowling Green, actually all of Warren County. There's a landscaping, buffering, and screening requirement, which is number 2 and 3 there for buffer between multifamily and single-family uses. It met that, so here we have the property extended with gravel. That's one violation. The gravel itself's another violation, and the landscaping and screening requirement was met and has now been removed, so that's the 3rd violation. So that constitutes the 3 violations.
How long has the Wilson owned this property?
It was purchased at auction, but I'm sure Mr. Wilson.
About what now?
It was purchased at auction at some point, I believe, either early this year or last year, but I'm sure Mr. Wilson can answer that.
Have there been any complaints from citizens on this property, or is this just a,
Yes, sir.
Quite a
And,
few.
we've had two separate complaints
one about a parking?
about the
sign?
whole situation, about the parking being extended and mostly the landscaping being removed. But those citizens, I know at least one of those citizens are here tonight and wishes to address you at some point.
Let me ask, so you only have one violation now? Is
No,
that
no,
right?
sir. There were 4, and
I
one
thought
of
you
those-
said there were 3.
There were 4. One of those was the sign that he had mentioned earlier. The sign was removed, so we reduced that to just the 3 violations you have before you tonight.
So down to 3, the landscape buffer, the dumpster screening, and the gravel/paving issue. Okay.
What would it take in your thought process to get this property back or where it should be? You're talking about dollars, months, whatever. Recognizing it's been going on for a while, I know that. But I'm saying, if we started today, could it be put back in the order it should be in?
Sure, with compliance, probably removing the gravel would allow for there's a 10-foot landscape buffer minimum, and that would allow for the the landscape to be put back. So that would do away with the parking standard violation if the removal of the gravel and the landscape and the screening of the dumpster, then it'd be down to 2.
So essentially removing about a foot of gravel, 20-foot whatever, and,
But y'all need to approve a plan, right?
We don't have to approve anything. All he really has to do is remove the gravel that was added, install the landscaping back in a manner that's compliance with the zoning ordinance, and then screen the dumpster per the zoning ordinance, and none of that requires any plans.
It'll all go away
It would all go away, yes, sir.
within a short period of time.
Just as soon as it could be done, we would be happy to throw all this away and move on to the next one.
Maybe we can make this a short
When you
meeting.
talk about landscape buffer, are we talking about planting trees, shrubs, anything?
Yeah, so the zoning ordinance requires, there's landscaping and then there's screening and buffering. So it's usually a mixture of evergreen trees and deciduous trees and bushes. So you have your low-level screening for headlights and then your trees, your landscaping for other. Or you can substitute a fence, like a privacy fence, an opaque fence for the evergreens. And that's the standard landscaping requirement that's been in place for a good number of years now in this community.
But it's got to be on that 10-foot variance off the property line, and the gravel's got to be moved before that can happen.
Correct.
I'm just trying to get a hold of this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How big of trees are you talking about?
There is a requirement in the zoning ordinance. Do you have that, James?
It's, I do.
3-inch caliper. It's not.
Yeah, the deciduous trees have a 1 3/4 inch diameter caliber, so almost a 2-inch size tree. Evergreen trees, 5 foot in height. Ornamental trees, 6 foot in height.
so if the Wilsons come up with a plan and present it to you, it makes sense, you buy off on it and they do it, it's a done deal?
As long as it's installed. Again, that's all we're.
It sounds pretty simple to me, but I'm a simple person. Any more questions? Wilson, it looked like you may have some representation here. Who is Mr. Wilson? I don't know.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Travis.
Well, I don't want to talk to you. I want to see Mr. Wilson first.
Well, I
please.
represent Mr. Wilson. This is him. I'm going to introduce you to him if you allow me to.
Yes.
This is
Turn
Mr.
your
Wilson
key.
here, and I'm his attorney, Travis Locke.
I'd like to swear you both in, please. Please state your name.
Grant Wilson?
Swear to tell the truth and much truth so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sir?
Yes, sir.
You swear to tell the truth and nothing but
No,
truth?
sir, I'm an attorney. I don't take oaths. I'm here to represent my client.
He doesn't have to, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, that's fine.
All right, Mr. Attorney, do your thing.
Yes, sir. It was my understanding, do I get an opportunity to ask Mr. Hetty some questions? You can sit down, Grant. Good evening, Mr. Hetty. How are you, sir? We want to see if we can get to an understanding of exactly what it is that Mr. Wilson needs to do so that his property is in compliance with the zoning ordinances. So I want to talk to you just a couple questions about those things. You have talked a couple of different times about the email correspondence that you engaged in with Mr. Wilson. Let's start off with, I wasn't involved in any of that. Is that correct? To your knowledge, I've just recently been retained. I haven't been involved in any of this up until tonight. Is that fair to say?
Your name was in probably the last one.
Yes, sir. Okay. You talked about that you had sent several emails and had several communications with Mr. Wilson where you had indicated to him that he needed to submit a landscaping plan to you. We're trying to figure out where he is required to submit a landscaping plan. Can you help me by telling me where it is that he's required to submit a landscaping plan?
Yes, sir. It's number 8 of Article 4.6.8.
Okay, and I'm looking at that where it says requirements of a landscape plan, and it talks about what needs to be in a landscape plan, and then Article 9 says landscape plans required for building permit, and it talks about when a landscape plan is required, that these are the things that must be in a landscape plan. What I'm trying to figure out is how do we know that a landscape plan is required for this property? Does that question make sense? Sure, and I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name or
Ben
your
Peterson.
title.
Ben Peterson, I'm the executive director of the Planning Commission.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So let me make this somewhat easy to answer to that question. It's when we say it's required and when we identify those violations. I'd be happy, as we've told Mr. Wilson before, and again, I heard you say you're just recently retained for this position, but I will be happy to not require a landscape plan if you'll just install it per the zoning ordinance. The end, simple.
Okay.
Just like we've always told him.
And you understand I'm asking that because
Sure.
we want to make sure we're doing everything that the ordinances require.
Absolutely,
Okay.
and that's all we've ever wanted.
All
Was
right, so
compliance.
basically, the answer is the landscape plan is required when the zoning commission says it is and when you ask for it.
A landscape is required in every single case, but we do have the power to waiver from that from
I
time
understand.
to time.
And the purpose of that plan is so that you know what the property owner is going to do before they do it, so they don't do something that you end up saying, no, this was wrong, and they basically waste time and money doing something. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page from the get-go. Is that fair to say?
Up front, yes, sir.
Okay. Moving on then, talking about the landscaping, since we're talking about the landscaping plan, Mr. Hetty has talked about a landscape buffer. He keeps using the terminology of landscape buffer. And so I don't know which of you I'm addressing this question to, whoever can answer it best, but as I read the zoning ordinances, there is a difference in a landscape buffer for incompatible use areas versus a screening that's required for VUAs, vehicle use areas, and they're two separate things. And so what I'm trying to understand, if you could help us understand, is this a landscape buffer for incompatible use areas, or is this a screening for vehicle use areas that is being required of Mr. Wilson by the Zoning Commission?
Both, in which case the more stringent applies.
Okay. And why is the answer both? Why is it not just, I mean, if we look at the
Because it's incompatible use is determined by the zoning administrator.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. I noticed that the landscaping buffer, it says that that would be subsection 2 of 4.68, where it says, land uses that are determined to be incompatible by the executive director of the planning commission shall be buffered at the following rates. And then it's got the requirements for the trees and so
Yes,
forth.
sir.
So I guess how is a person, a property owner in Bowling Green, Kentucky, like Grant Wilson, to know whether or not his land use that he's recently purchased at auction has been determined to be incompatible by the executive director of the planning commission? How is he to know that?
Because we told him that when we met with him at a pre-application conference for his rezoning application.
Okay, and what makes the land use incompatible as determined by the executive director?
Because through a combination of history and uses, multifamily has always been determined through our office as incompatible with single family as far as the buffering and screening is concerned.
Okay, and if we could refer, would you mind flipping through those pictures? There was one I think is particularly helpful. We'll just start right there. Either of you can answer this. Maybe this will help the members understand. Both of those buildings in that photograph are Mr. Wilson's apartment buildings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the person that took that picture would have been standing on the street on Cabell Drive. Is that?
Yes.
Am I correct on that? Looking straight between the two buildings that he owns?
Yes, sir.
And then the property line or the buffer area is right in line with that telephone pole behind that dumpster. Is that correct?
Continuing on, yes.
Okay. And I guess that is the dumpster. That still is the way the dumpster is today. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And you all would agree with me that there are specific requirements for screening around the dumpster that he needs to comply with that clearly aren't being done right now, right?
Yes.
So if he gets those, if he gets that work performed, pursuant to the zoning regulations, as it pertains to dumpsters, that will eliminate that issue. Is that correct?
The dumpster one.
Okay.
Yes.
So assuming that he's got plans to have that installed, he's got a contractor hired, and he's just waiting on the contractor to get there to build the fence around the dumpster, then we can move to the other two. If we could move to the next picture, please. Okay, so this is up there at the dumpster looking down the parking lot edge, right?
Yes.
And if we could go one more picture. The house that would be on the right of that picture, in other words, the green grass that's in that yard, that's the incompatible home, that's the single family home?
Correct.
Help me understand, isn't that home zoned identical to Mr. Wilson's properties? I mean, you guys have referred to it as a single, I'm not sure what the exact, single
use of the land is not quite the same as the zoning. A property can be zoned but have a different use, and so it's the use of the land.
So it's, if I could just show you this, what we got from the zoning commission, this being Mr. Wilson's property, this would be the property that we're talking about, the neighbors that complained about
Yeah.
the trees being gone?
Okay, so yes, it is zoned RM3, the portion, and I forgot what address it is, but it's treated as one development because they share parking as one development.
Okay.
But the RM3 standards, when it's a single-family use, reverts back to the RS1B standards in the zoning ordinance. Therefore, it is single-family and treated
Okay.
as such. So it's incompatible
So that's why
use.
it's an incompatible
Yes, sir.
land use.
Yes, sir.
So you said earlier when I asked you, is this a buffer between incompatible land uses that he should be trying to comply with? Or is this a screening for a vehicle use area? Because that's a parking lot that he has.
Sure.
And there's a parking lot, and then he moved the trees, he cut the trees out.
Right.
Between that and the home that we're talking about
Right.
from the people who presumably have
Right,
complained
so
about
it
the
was
trees being missing.
compliant, and then when he removed the
Okay.
trees, it's out of compliance.
So you said earlier that the more stringent of the two would apply. Which is that? Should he be trying to,
So the incompatible use buffer is the more stringent than the vehicle use area. So since this happens to be one and the same because it's the edge of a parking lot, which is a vehicle use area, but is also the property line, so it is the buffer as well.
so okay, all right. And so I guess, would you agree with me that if Grant Wilson didn't know whether he's supposed to be complying with the buffer, the incompatible land use buffer regulations, or the vehicle utilization area screening, as the code calls it, that could cause him some delay in figuring out what he needs to do to fix this?
No. I mean, I'm just going to say no because, again, we met with Mr. Wilson at that pre-application conference many months ago and informed him of these violations.
Is there a document that is generated by the zoning commission when a land use is determined to be incompatible by the executive director? Is there some document that evidences that of record that determination has been made? Or you guys can just say that anytime you want and whoever hears that is supposed to accept that?
I would say yes. Anybody who hears that is supposed to accept that because there's a separate appeal process for disagreements there.
For a disagreement over whether it's an incompatible land use area?
Any determination by the executive director, zoning enforcement officer, it can be appealed to the Board of Adjustment, yes.
Well, I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding, if there's not a document that evidences that it's been determined to be an incompatible land use area, and thus the more stringent requirement applies, if there's not a document that evidences that, then how is the landowner going to appeal that if he never received something telling him the executive director has determined his land to be an incompatible use area?
So there's a process for that too. You can ask for an official zoning letter interpretation to do that, and then once you receive that, then you can make the appeal to the Board of Adjustment and pay all the fees and go through that process. But again, we met with the man, told him what the violations are, and hopefully, our word and our agreements are honored at some point, and we don't have to come to this point because all we ever want is compliance.
Okay. So basically, if we're looking at that picture right there, that area between where the photographer is standing and the dumpster, that is the buffer line that needs to be landscaped in accordance with the incompatible land use buffer provision of the zoning ordinance. Am I correct?
So yes, the gravel would need to be taken up because it was added. It's not allowed to be, you're not allowed to extend the parking lot and use gravel without proper permits and permissions and all of that. So that is encroached closer than that 10 foot. So the gravel would have to be removed and the landscaping would have to be installed back to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance, yes.
Okay, help me understand. I'm looking at that picture, and it looks to me like you've got blacktop on the left, and
Yeah.
you've got parking spaces painted on the left on the blacktop, and then you've got what appears to be an edge of gravel, and then appears to me to be what I would call riprap rock that you can see on the right edge that's under that gravel.
That was all added, yes.
That, what part of that? It was my understanding that the trees were growing just to the right of those riprap rocks and were removed. I'm not understanding why it is that the zoning commission believes that that gravel was added and that shouldn't be there, that
Well,
gravel.
that's very simple. We have historical area photos that have taken every 2 years, and you just go back 2 years, and the edge of the parking lot was simple. And then again, we have the admission of Mr. Wilson at our pre-application conference that he added the gravel. So that's why.
Mr. Wilson admitted to me that there was an old chain link fence that he removed up the edge of the pavement, and he replaced with gravel. So the edge of the pavement had an old chain link fence through there.
Okay, and I'm looking at the ordinance in Article 4 that talks about the parking standard, because that's what he's alleged to be violating. Subsection 10 of Article 4, am I right?
Yes.
Where it says, parking shall be provided, all parking areas shall be paved with asphalt, concrete, brick pavers, or similar material. And it's the zoning commission's position, if I'm understanding you correctly, that edge of gravel on the edge of the blacktop parking lot violates the provision that the parking lot must be asphalt, concrete, brick pavers, or similar material.
Correct. If you're going to have parking lot in the city of Bowling Green or in Warren County, it has to be paved.
But would you not agree with me that the entire parking lot is blacktop? You've just got some gravel around the edges. I mean, they're not going to park cars on the 4 feet of gravel that he's added to the edge, is he?
That's what we were told, yes, that he was going to do that. In fact, there were parallel spaces that went to the edge, and then they were just changed to pull in once they added the other, and yes, it has to be blacktopped. Edge to edge. Gravel's not allowed.
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is it says all parking areas shall be paved with asphalt. And it appears to me that the parking area is paved, but you've got some gravel around the outside edge of the parking area. I mean, I don't know. Does the code define parking area? I mean, it seems to me that parking area would be the area where you park the cars, not the edge that skirts around it. I mean,
I don't know how you want me to answer that. I mean,
well, but you want this guy to fix this stuff and do it the way you want it done, but to date, he's been unable to get answers on how to fix it to your satisfaction.
that I do disagree with that statement.
That's all my questions.
I got a question for you. What's your name?
Travis Locke.
Long?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Locke, L-O-C-K.
Okay. In my period of time of being city commissioner, been involved with this board and other things, I've never seen a person come in and browbeat city officials that are trying to do their job like you have done tonight. I'm very personally disappointed. That's all I have to say.
I don't know how to respond to that.
You don't need to.
Can I ask one additional question?
Yes, sir.
Temporary housing has been on this gravel some, is that true? I mean, temporary parking, you've been allowed, no cars have not, and there's no fees being charged to your tenants?
Parking space out of 18 that is written.
Oh, I see, okay.
But nobody parks on the
Okay, I see, okay.
And Mr. Simpson, I feel obligated to respond to that. My client, Mr. Wilson, has been working with these individuals. I've not been involved in that process to the point where obviously they've reached an impasse because they wrote a citation to him. He appealed that citation. It was our understanding that we were having a hearing on that appeal. I come in here, I mean, no disrespect to this board or to these gentlemen, but my job as an attorney representing Mr. Wilson is to try to elicit the facts that are necessary for you gentlemen to get an understanding of what's going on here. And I, to the extent that you feel like I've browbeat anybody, I take exception to that. I'm simply asking the gentleman questions. So, you know, I don't know why you would feel that way, but I take exception to that.
That's fine. That's good.
I'd like to ask a question. Why did you put the gravel in? What purpose?
The riprap zone underneath.
Why don't you step up here, please, Trent?
Need to be sworn.
I think they swore him.
I swore him in already.
The riprap that you see there on the far right has been there since they built the parking lot. I simply added 4 inches of dense grade
Yeah.
to smooth it out. It was rough. It was horrible. But the parking, you can see there's some painted lines, and they're painted parallel. If someone was to park there, it would be on the blacktop parallel.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you understand what needs to be done, and can we work it out between you two people? Or two?
I
Whatever.
don't think we can. If you would allow me to elaborate.
Well, please do.
The stone, I can't remove the stone. I mean, I could, but I can't remove the stone because then it would leave a wall there
Right.
where the parking lot would fail. So in between the toe of the slope, the bottom of the riprap, and the actual property line
Could be several feet, right?
Yes, it's a very, there's a good transition there.
Okay.
And it's only maybe 2.5 feet, so I don't have any room to plant any trees. I'm willing to do everything they ask of me.
Okay.
But to be upfront, I really don't want to remove the edge of my parking lot.
I could see a car rolling off the side.
Well, we have, me and Mr. Locke has formulated a plan we would like to submit to someone we think would be a good fix and give some soil to plant the various trees that are needed. As far as the dumpster, I've talked to Decker Fencing. You know, that can be taken care of readily. But the other, I need them to work with me on that.
We don't want you to be hurt. We want you.
Man,
you're a good citizen.
I'm
we
just
know
trying
that.
to clean up
Yeah.
the neighborhood.
Yeah. We understand.
I'll just add to that, a plan would be nice. We have not seen one.
Do what now?
A plan would be nice. We have not even seen one, so
Okay.
still have not.
Well, to respond to that, I got with Barry Claypool, who originally surveyed the property. He has since given me a email for Lucas Slavey, an engineer, to draw up a plan. But everybody's so busy, no excuse. But I mean, when Mr. Hetty had given me the citation, I mean, I was on it. Now, the first 30 days, I wasn't on it because I assumed I had 30 days to come up with a plan. That was my mistake. It was 30 days to have it fixed.
How many days would you like to have to work out with these people and get it resolved?
30 days?
I'm serious.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if, I've got Decker can fix that in 2 weeks.
we
Then by
don't want you getting a bind and putting, if you can't do it,
I think 60 days would be fair. If they would allow me to do the plan that I've come up with.
Well, no, I think you got to work it out with them to
Okay,
comply
yeah.
with the rules. It's
Is
not-
that plan going to meet the, is that
Well,
plan
that's
going
my
to meet the
next.
code?
That's my next question because with the stone there, we're kindly limited, obviously, because there's a different in transition, and there's so little bit of soil between. I feel like I ought not have to remove the stone that's holding up my parking lot. I added 4 inches. I'd be glad to take the 4 inches away. That's not a problem. But the stone that's holding up the blacktop, I mean, it's been there since 1960.
What was holding up the blacktop before you put the stone in?
Dirt, and it was a lot of overgrowth
And a fence.
and a fence. Yeah, it was just, it was a mess.
Did you add the riprap rock?
No,
Is
no,
that
sir.
already
No,
there?
sir. Absolutely not. You can tell it's been there
What
for
exactly did you add?
4 inches of dense grade gravel to cap it off.
And gentlemen, we think we have a plan. I have studied, that's one of the reasons I was asking these gentlemen about the specific requirements of the zoning ordinance, is because up until today, I've been involved in this since October 10th. And up until that time, it has been unclear to me, my job as an attorney, when he comes to me and says, the zoning commission says I'm not doing what I need to do, we need to figure out what we need to do. Then my job as an attorney is to look at that ordinance, see exactly what it requires, so that we know exactly what the law requires of him to do, and then we come up with a plan on how to do that. Well, it was unclear to me in looking at the zoning ordinances and studying those and reading those word for word, much of which was new to me. It was unclear to me exactly what the zoning commission was saying he needed. Were they saying that he needs to have a buffer for a incompatible land use area, or were they saying that he needs to have a screen for a vehicle use area? There are two separate sections of the code. And until tonight, I was uncertain, which it was to do. So my questions to these gentlemen was not to browbeat anybody. My question was to try to figure out exactly what it is that we need to do. And we believe, having heard that now, we believe that we have a plan to put in a buffer / screen in that area that complies with the incompatible land use buffer area, that complies with all of the landscaping requirements. We already have arrangements made to fix the dumpster area, to add the fence, and we believe that our plan will fix all of this.
When was this plan prepared?
Well, the plan was, I met with Grant on October the 10th at the site, looked at it. I had a copy of the zoning ordinances with me. We went through we had the letter of the notice of the violations, which outlined what the violations were. We went through all that, and we tried to come up with an idea. But then we learned that it was going to require a landscape plan be submitted to zoning for approval before we start work. And so then I went back to the code and I said, well, where does the code require a landscape plan? And it doesn't. As you heard tonight, it doesn't. When they decide that they want you to have one, then they tell you that you got to have a landscape plan. I couldn't find anywhere in the code that requires a landscape plan.
May I clarify
Please,
that?
please.
If I may, I guess, state my view of what you said, it's a little different. It requires it unless we say it
Yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't, it's just made up as we go.
Oh, no.
It requires it unless we say it doesn't, i.e. we waive that requirement to try to help.
And I accept that, but the unfortunate part is nowhere in the code does it say what you just said. I accept your explanation, but that's not in there. It doesn't say that in the zoning ordinance.
So you've got a plan that's been completed
We
and
we
ready
have-
to submission to the
We
staff?
have a plan in our minds. What we do not have yet is an actual landscape plan, because the landscape plan pursuant to the zoning regulation is required to be prepared by a licensed architect or an engineer, someone who's qualified and licensed to do that. So that's another part. We had the plan and we thought, okay, we've got a plan, we can draw it up. He was going to prepare it, and then we learned that the plan is required to be done by a licensed architect. So that's when he talked to Lucas Slavey about getting the plan done from a licensed individual who's qualified to do that. And so that the actual plan itself from a licensed professional has not been prepared yet, and we're hoping to have that. But one of the things I wanted to learn tonight was, are we required to pay an engineer or an architect such as Lucas Slavey to actually do that? Because that costs money.
We can go around and around all night. Again, if we would have had conversations with us instead of waiting until tonight, we would have been happy to try to accommodate that. Lucas Slavey is not a landscape architect, so it would not have counted anyway, but that is, again, something we could waive and just have a landscape plan. And so, again, it does say this. It's in Article 1, not in Article 4, 5, or 6, the zoning ordinance. So,
Might I add, I visited Mr. Hetty several times and expressed, I mean, I think he would tell you that I was very approachable, and I went to his office and expressed that I'm willing to do what you want me to do, but you see, I have gravel there. It's been there since 1960. Let's formulate, let's figure out, let's have a meeting,
Okay, I think it could be done. Let me interrupt both of you just for a moment. Do we have some neighbors here that need to participate? Or, do you mind, are they here? Yes, sir. Okay, well, come forward and tell us what we need to know. And I know you're an attorney, so I can't swear you in either, can I?
I'll take one if you want me to.
No. Go ahead.
I got some questions.
I speak nothing but the truth anyway.
Tell us the name, please.
Matt Baker.
Okay.
And it's a pleasure to be here. I represent Lynn and Kevin Walsh. It's the couple back behind me. They own the property at 1519 Park Street. And so if you were to look at the picture that's up on the screen, their backyard is of that house is over to the right. They're downhill from that gravel slope there. And so I don't know what your decision is going to be, and I don't know whether, depending on what your decision is, I don't know whether there will be an appeal, but we did want to get just a brief amount of testimony into the record and a few photographs. So if I could call Lynn Walsh, I'd be... Come on up. State your name. Oh, you got to swear to tell
And we
the
need
truth.
to give us your name, please.
My name is Lynn Walsh.
Just swear to tell the truth, no but truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Ms. Walsh, do you and your husband own the property at 1519 Park Street?
Yes, we do.
How long have you owned it?
Since 2008.
And during your period of ownership, did you take a series of photographs of the backyard that looks toward the property that's the parking lot?
Many pictures, yes.
Okay. Are these the 3 pictures of the backyard that were taken before the vegetation and the fence was removed and the rock was installed?
Yes, they are.
And did they fairly and accurately depict the condition of the backyard at that time?
They do.
And
There's an extra copy here.
you want to see these? Thank you. Let's give them a chance to take a quick look at that.
That's a nice little before and after. Oh, 2 afters.
So somebody needs to explain where we are here. This is the tree line that was taken down? Okay. This tree line. Yeah.
Pretty private.
When was this done? About?
It was done somewhere around November of last year. It'll be a year now.
That's Mr. Grant's property.
So this was a good privacy fence, right? This provided good privacy?
Oh, it was wonderful privacy.
Yeah, yeah. This is what you'd like to have today, right?
Yes,
Something
sir.
like that.
Thank you.
Ms. Walsh, do you have a couple of after pictures that are taken from essentially, maybe not the exact same location, but are looking in the same direction, up across the parking lot and toward the Lambda Chi House and the Science Building?
Yes, they are.
Is there any vegetation back there anymore along the back boundary to your property?
Weeds,
Is there any privacy?
absolutely none.
And is that why you're here in front of this board tonight?
A number of reasons. The vegetation is gone. There's tremendous noise now. We can hear the traffic on the road behind the fraternity house. The drainage problem, it seems to be a pitch to the gravel that was added, and it goes into a downslope. So to the right corner of our property, if we had a heavy rain, it's now, see where the water's pooling? Right there in the parking lot? Well, if there's more water, it's going to come into our property now.
And so, does any of the rock that was added by the new owner, does it come what you believe to be the property line?
Yes.
And the rock, the trees, the noise, the lack of privacy, are those yours and your husband's concerns?
Yes, it was just, I was totally shocked to walk down the driveway and see the entire backyard naked. And just very disappointed and upset that no one called and had said anything to us or asked to discuss it with us.
What about that chain link fence?
Chain link fence
Was
is
it-
gone. There were railings behind.
Well, was it in a state of a good repair, or, I mean, did it need to be knocked down, or what?
It was an old chain link fence, but it was there for a purpose. And we never bothered with it. We enjoyed our privacy in the yard. Didn't feel there was any need to take it down. It wasn't broken. It was just, as a matter of fact, the next door neighbor had one up as well, and I recently saw that that was taken down. So I don't know what to say.
Ms. Walsh, those are going to be all of my questions.
Okay.
Of course, Mr. Locke may have some for you, or the board members may have some for you.
Essentially, it's, none of that vegetation nor the fence was on your property, is that correct?
Wasn't on our property. It was on the buffer. What
No,
should
no,
have
I
been-
understand that, but it wasn't physically your ownership property. It wasn't your fence or your trees.
Fence was on our property. The fence was on our property. I believe some of that rock there, that was much higher before, and like Mr. Wilson said, and then he covered it with crush. Is that what you call it, crush? I had some railings, some wrought iron railings behind the shed. They're gone. It wasn't an overnight thing, but it was a shock to see. I don't live in Bowling Green, but when I come up, I check on my property and make sure it's in good shape, make sure the renters are taking care of it. And when I saw that, I was just totally, totally shocked. And we started the process with talking to the people from the city to find out what we could do and why this happened, and no one had talked to us.
Mr. Wilson or anyone representing him did not discuss these actions before they were
Sir.
taken.
Thank you.
I need to hear something again, and I want to ask the question. The fence was on your property? That's what, I need to know what was on whose property. Did Mr. Wilson have the right to cut the trees down? Was it on his property?
Sir, you haven't been sworn in, so.
As a matter of complete transparency, they're in the process of speaking to Jim Adams to get a survey done and determine where the exact back line is. So I'm not, he can answer to the best of his ability.
Sure. Go ahead.
State your name, please.
Alan Walsh.
Do you swear to tell the truth and of the truth so help you God?
I will.
Thank you.
So I would like to amend what my wife said, based on the information we have presently before the survey is done again. I believe the fence was embedded on the top of that stone wall. That isn't, we don't believe it's on our property at this point. In terms of the fence's condition, it's an old farm fence, you know,
Right,
the old
right.
4x4, yeah, you know what it is.
Probably
That's-
growth in it and
Oh, yeah,
vegetation.
yeah,
You
yeah,
could-
it was a
probably
mess.
couldn't sit in a lot of places.
Yeah, yeah, but the thing that's very nice about that fence is it kept the college kids up there at Lambda Chi from going into the residential community where we live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I can see your position, I can see his position, I can see both of them, so I'm not sure that we can do anything about that. I think the two representatives, after you get some type of survey, is what's going to have to be done to resolve that. That's my opinion, but I understand where you're coming from. I do. Any more questions? And thank you both very much. We appreciate that. Thank you. Were there more questions? Planning and zoning, what's your comment? What you think?
If the board's so inclined, I mean, we're happy to give them a little more time. I'd probably lean towards the 30-day instead of the 60-day, as just because we've been going back and forth on arguing what the zoning ordinance says
Okay,
and
all
doesn't
right.
versus actually
Let's
supplying it.
let's say we understand what the zoning rules and regulations are. We're going to accept that as a fact, okay? Okay. Do you think you can get together with these people and talk about what has to be done and come up with a plan for 30 days? I'm not saying have it done. I'm saying have a plan that both of you agree to. It can be done within 30 days. Mr. Wilson?
Yes, sir. To answer your question, I do. It just takes some time to get it executed due to everybody's busy and they don't work on my,
Well-
But yes, sir, to answer your question.
Okay.
Perhaps 30 days to develop the plan, approve the plan, get it all processed, and then another 30 days to complete all the work, and will that give you time to be in compliance with
Yes, sir.
everything? So we're looking at 60 days, and it's going to be hopefully
But I will say this, if I may. They're leaning toward making me take the gravel out. Can we resolve this tonight?
My response to that, and I guess you call me out of order if I am, but that is the zoning ordinance requirement, and this body cannot change that because it is a law adopted by the city commission.
My concern is that the ordinances can't be changed at this point in time. We have to stick to the ordinances, what they are, and I think I'm willing to go with some extra time to work with these gentlemen and come to an agreement. That's why we're here. Mr. Chairman's already said we're here to try to help everybody and not hurt anyone. But the ordinances need to be clear. And once they're clear and clearly defined in a very succinct fashion, then you've got time to get it done. And it may cost you some money, which you may not want to spend. I mean, you say you've got something stated in here, could cost $25,000. $23,000 to replace a retaining wall. I understand it's a lot of money, but still, if it's the code, it has to be done. So that's all I want.
I think we have a plan. If you can see that, I guess you gentlemen can see that on your screens, can't you? I'm just now figuring that out. I'm trying to figure out how to see it. We believe, and once the survey is done, it'll show us clearly, but we believe the property line is more in line with that telephone pole in that picture right there. In other words, there's some additional ground that we believe will be on his property, and what we think that can be done is we can go in that entire, it's about 100, 110 linear feet, that whole line is, and we can comply with the buffers between incompatible land use requirements, which sets out how many deciduous trees, how many evergreen trees per 100 linear feet. We can have a plan to plant those in that area. And then it has to be an average of 10 foot wide, the buffer zone does. So as I understand it, it can be 7 in some places, 12 in others.
No, that's where that would be the difference between the screening of a vehicle use area versus the 10-foot hard
That's the
buffer.
difference.
You have a 10-foot hard
It has to
standard.
be a minimum of 10 feet wide everywhere
Correct.
from the
Along the-
incompatible land use line.
Along there, yeah.
Okay, so what we hope that we can do is go from these folks' property line, according to this new survey, come back 10 feet, and then make that 10 feet width area the entire linear length of the property line, make that the buffer zone, plant the trees that are required to be planted, then put landscaping rock over all of that that meets the requirements of the buffer landscaping rock. There's certain requirements of what kind of rock. So we cover all that gravel up with appropriate landscaping rock that meets the requirements of the code, and then we get the dumpster done, and that will eliminate all of the issues. That eliminates the gravel issue because we've then replaced that gravel with the appropriate landscape rock. So I know these are things we'll have to work out with these guys, but I wanted to try to give you a little bit of an insight into what we believe we can do. And if we don't have to hire an architect or an engineer to draw this up, and we can simply draw this up and get with these gentlemen and figure this out without having to go to that expense, then that would expedite, obviously, getting this work done. Then we won't be waiting on an architect to do this drawing for us and send us a bill for it. So that's kind of where we see things possibly going.
Mr. Wilson, in light of of your neighbors, and you will remain friends and good stead with your neighbors, if trees stay 10 foot, put them 5 foot, put them 3 foot together, give them as much protection in the future as you can, so you'll have neighbors.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I would make a suggestion that you include them in your planning. Don't just say, here it's done, like it or leave it. Can you do that?
Sir.
All right, so we're looking at a 30-day, everybody's going to get together before 30 days, and can we get some report back within 30 days, this board, so we'll know that some progress has been made?
Yes, sir.
And we really don't have to see anybody again ever before if we get it all done, do we?
If it's under the satisfaction of planning and zoning staff, no, we do not.
And that's us, okay? We appreciate you doing what you're doing. We appreciate the neighbors. We understand what you're talking about. We can see the concern. I can see Mr. Wilson's position also, but we just want to do what we think is fair, and we don't want people mad and angry with one another, because it does happen sometimes. We need to work for solutions, and we all have problems.
Mr. Chairman, I got one suggestion. I think we need a motion to do that and set it on our agenda for the 27th, just to see where you're.
I agree.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we have that we provide a 60-day window to address a plan between Mr. Wilson, the neighbors, and I apologize, the names.
Welch, yeah.
Yes, and the Planning and Zoning Commission, Planning and Zoning. That's it.
30 days the plan.
Well, I gave them 60 days to get it done. I mean, I want it within that 60 days.
Let me suggest that we do, or let me take
Yeah.
a line, just counting. Tabitha being the ever astute person reminded me that we probably won't meet at Christmas. So if we gave 60, it'd really be 89 days when we met in January. So that's why I was suggesting we review it on the 27th.
At least have the plan.
Yeah.
Where everybody signed off on it, and it's a goal. I
And
mean,
your
It's November 27th. I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you, Mr. Broderick.
Yeah, it's November 27th
It's a
at
meeting.
5 o'clock here, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to suggest that we amend the suggestion here that the plan be submitted in 30 days, and that with your approval, we would go forward from that, because we don't have a meeting in December. Was that acceptable?
Yes, it is.
second motion, or amendment, or whatever.
A Deer, Wilder,
Yes?
Deer,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes.
Wilder,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Planning and zoning, I want to thank you for your presentation. It wasn't easy, I know. It wasn't easy at all. But, and this is our first time we've had an issue with you or a deal with you. And we thank you for your honesty and your hard work, and we know it's not easy, okay? And we thank everybody for coming this evening and working out something that we hope is going to be suitable for everyone. Any more comments from anybody?
Yeah, no Charlie Brown Christmas trees planted there.
Okay. Entertain a motion for,
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thomas, Deere,
Yes.
Simpson,
yes,
Wilder,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
we are adjourned.